In this episode, you'll discover how important autonomy is for athletes when they receive coaching advice and the differences between older and younger rowers.
Feel the grip of the oar handle, smooth yet firm in your hands. Taste the salt of your own sweat and the occasional splash of water. It's all part of the journey. Welcome to another episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Each week, our host, Masters rowing coach Rebecca Caro, dives deep into the world of Masters rowing. Whether you're on the water or in the gym, join us to become a faster master. Let's go rowing.
And it's time for the Coach Mastermind again. December, final one for the year. We have done a lot this year. And today, for I think the first time ever, I've decided to ask a guest to come and hang out with us. Dave, welcome to the Mastermind group. Why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about your background and how you and I first met?
Yep, okay. My background is in business psychology. That's kind of my interest, and that came about because I was a police officer for about 30 years here in the UK, and towards the end of that last 3 years, I got a job at the College of Policing, teaching, training senior managers. So I led the senior management development program over here. And part of that, psychometric testing, training elements, obviously lots of executive coaching, all of that side of it. And I actually taught various business psychology qualifications, including becoming a certified business psychologist. And as part of that, I did a psychology master's degree. And when I was coming towards the end of that, and I was wanting to do some research, I kind of wanted to steer away from that because I'd done so much research into the business psychology world and organisational cultures and all the stuff that was of my interest. I thought I'd do something around sports psychology. And I took up rowing probably 4 years ago now. I've been a ardent erger for decades. First moved on the water about 4 years ago and decided that rowing was where it was at. So I've always been fascinated by the difference of the executive coaching world and the sports coaching world, and I wanted to do something around that. So I did the research around that. It was very successful, and then following that, we went on to publish the research. And our background really is that because I was interested in sports through their lifespan, from 18 right through to as old as I could find, I came to Faster Masters Rowing so that I could access your social media and put out appeals for people to participate in the research. And that's how you and I met, Rebecca.
Absolutely right. And I'm interested what were the differences you found between sports psychology and business psychology?
Well, probably the coaching side of it in the main. Sports coaching, if you think of coaching on a continuum, so at one end of the continuum, you've got directive coaching. And directive coaching is coach knows best and tells the coachee what they should be doing. The executive coaching is the other end of the spectrum, and that is non-directive coaching. And that works on the principle the coachee has all the resources within themselves to solve their problem. And you move up and down the scale. A good coach will stay up and down the end. But what you'll find with an executive coach is they're very much at the non-directive end. So a lot more asking questions, very little giving of information. The principle is that an executive coach can coach anybody from any field on any subject because they're acting as a facilitator. Sport coaching at the other end is very directive. The presumption there is that the coach has got some level of expertise in the sport that they're coaching, and they basically direct the athlete on what they need to do because the coach knows best. And so those are the two extremes. But like I say, good coaches will move up and down. There's no single coach that is completely non-directive or completely directive. There's a noticeable difference that I could see, and I was just fascinated about how that impacted on people's psychology, really.
So you did a huge amount of work, not alone, in a team,
Yep.
and surveyed a large number of, were they only rowers that you surveyed?
Yep, rowers and scullers. And we got 839 participants from all over the English-speaking world. And so we got real good representation, and mainly from the US, but we got them from a lot of the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and anybody who could speak English, really.
Yeah.
And so we got participation from age 18, which was the minimum, right up to our oldest participant was 88. And we got really good men as well. So we got men and women. We got some adaptive rowers, so good representation across the different groups. And we got good representation from people who were just hobby rowers within a club, right through to ex-Olympians and everything in between.
So what were you asking them?
What we're asking them is about their sense of autonomy. Now, autonomy is really important in the field of motivation. And what I was interested in is why do people participate less in sports as they get older? And that's where the theories of motivation came in. So autonomy is linked to self-determination theory. I'll stop using all the jargon shortly. But it's a really, really well-established theory of motivation. It's been applied widely within the sports coaching world. And it's one of three. So autonomy, competence, and relatedness are three things that then lead to high levels of motivation. And autonomy, in real simple terms, is just a sense of volition, a sense that you own your own destiny, a sense that things are being done because of your own choice rather than because you've been told to do them.
Okay, and so give us an example of what autonomy in a rowing coaching situation might look like.
Right, so autonomy in a rowing situation, the difference would be if you were looking at autonomy supportive coaching, then what a coach would do, they would be seeking to engage in an equal partnership with a coachee. So it'd be a lot less directive if we go back to the continuum. So rather than the coach saying, right, this is what we're going to do, ladies and gents, we're going to focus on this today, and I'll tell you if you're doing it right, and I'll tell you if you're doing it wrong, and then we'll debrief at the end. That's the traditional method. Whereas the autonomy supportive coaching works more on the principle that the athlete is actually very capable of determining what coaching they need themselves. So it become more of a two-way conversation. So you will be more of an executive coach towards me. So you will say, right, Dave, what do you want to do today? What do you want to work on? So I can still tap into your expertise and your knowledge, because I might say, well, do you know what? We've been working on, I don't know, the finish for months and months and months now. I think I'm probably as good as I'm going to get, but actually my catch is probably letting me down. And actually, I'd like to do a little bit on that today, just for a bit of a change, even if you're saying, well, I still want to get the finish right because we're not ready to move on yet. I can say, yeah, for a change. It could be something as simple as that. The other thing as well is you could just say to me, we've been working on the finish for months and months and months. How do you think you're doing? What progress do you think you're making? What elements are you struggling with? Which bits are you finding easier? Which are you finding harder? That thing that we seem to have really plateaued on that we just can't move past. What additional resources do you think you can tap into to develop that? And have that conversation and draw it more out of me to say, right, this is where we need to move towards. Great when it's a one-to-one, a little bit tricky when you've got an 8 or something like that, that you're all different skill levels and abilities, but principles are exactly the same. This applies to team sports as well as it does individuals. So
thank you. That's good context, and I'm sure everybody who's listening will be thinking, when I am coaching, am I using a bit of both? You mentioned a continuum. What's a helpful thing for a coach to be asking themselves at this point, having just heard the definitions and examples?
I think probably the best assessment a coach can do for themselves is just reflect on how much am I asking questions and listening, and how much am I telling.
Okay.
So that's probably the way describing the continuum. So the directed coaching is very much around, I'll tell you what you need to do because I can see it enough, to the actually you probably know it as well, so let's draw it out of you. And the difference is that if it comes from me as the athlete, then it improves my motivation because I'm doing something that I want to work on and I feel like I'm getting value rather than I'm at the effect of somebody else. So when you start to look at motivation, there are different levels of motivation, and you get intrinsic or internal motivation, and you get external motivation factors. So external motivation factors would be, let's say, I'll give a silly example to illustrate the point. We haven't had much attendance at the club now for several months. We really need to increase the numbers. So we'll pay everybody $1,000 if they come to the club next Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd be beating them off at the door, of course you would. And that can be a very, very effective motivator. So external motivators are considered to be really, really ineffective. It's the bottom end of the scale. But they're really, really effective, but they're really, really fragile. And what I mean by that, as soon as you withdraw and remove the incentive, the motivation stops.
The motivation stops. So it's just tied directly to the incentive.
Yeah. But if you were to open it up and deliver a motivation that came from inside, an internal motivator, then people will keep going. And not only will I do what you're asking of me as a coach or advising me to do as a coach, but you'll probably find I'll be coming in sessions in between of my own, just because I haven't quite nailed it yet. And I really, really want to get the hang of this before next time. I want to do it to my own ends. So the best example of internal motivation is a young child. They play because they want to play. There's no reward, there's no incentive. They just do it because they like it, they love it, they want to do it. And we kind of look at that as that, and it's kind of get a sense of that back as well.
So taking that principle then into your research, what did you ask and what did you find out?
Well, there is an established survey. So what we found really is that the big positive is that rowers as a group enjoy high levels of motivation and enjoy high levels of autonomy. A sense of autonomy is higher than you would necessarily expect across the population. Yeah. The thing that I was looking for specifically is, does that change as people get older? And of course, this is of interest for Faster Masters rowing in particular. Because people tend to drop off in their participation, motivation doesn't really change through different groups, but how the motivational factors are fulfilled, it does. And what previous research has found is that as people get older, they're less accepting of autonomy frustrating environments. And one of the things we found was that autonomy is frustrated by coaching alone. So if people are coached versus the people that weren't coached had lower senses of their autonomy being fulfilled, which stands to reason, really. You would expect that. You've got a third party who's basically saying, wherever they are on the spectrum, they're giving some element of direction. So that's reducing the sense of autonomy. So that was to be expected. The thing that we didn't expect quite so much was that actually the older people get, the more they have a sense that their autonomy has been fulfilled. So they feel more freedom, they feel less frustrated by any coaching element, and that's not something that we expected. We expected it to be the other way.
Very interesting. So explain why your expectations were set the way they were, obviously, before you did the survey.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One was there are lots of moves currently for people as they're older to be coached differently in the sporting world. And so this is where we talk about adult-oriented coaching, and they say that their needs are different. Now, the fact that basic psychological needs are different flies in the face of a lot of the theory, because the theory is that actually the needs don't really change for anybody, but how they're fulfilled is. So that was one side. I was interested whether there was an evidence base for what coaches and coaching organisations, big national coaching organisations, training courses are calling for. So there was that side of it. And then the other side of it was the existing research. And the existing research stuff, they say that as people get older, they self-select and self-deselect as to whether they're going to go to an environment that is autonomy supportive or not. So basically, you get a bit more confidence within your own skin to say, actually, I don't enjoy that anymore, and I'm going to do that. You might not articulate it in terms of because it's frustrating my autonomy or it's satisfying my autonomy needs, but that's what people do. So I was expecting that people would be self-deselecting if they were being coached because they were exposing themselves to an autonomy frustrating environment. So that's what I thought.
Okay.
And actually it worked the other way. So actually younger adults, they found that they were more autonomy frustrated and their autonomy satisfaction was lower. And it was higher in older adults.
So I'm just going to exaggerate to make a point. Is that because people don't know it all, and because masters don't get any coaching anyway, so any tiny bit of coaching we get we're obscenely grateful for?
There's an element. Actually, I quoted one of your references, Rebecca, in the paper itself. It came out in the process. The peer reviewers didn't like it because they were a bit too hung up on it needs to be sort of previous peer-reviewed research, stuff that they call the grey literature, which is one of your coaching sites. I think you once said somewhere that I found that older masters rower is going to take coaching advice from a 30-year-old. And I think that was the bit that summed it up for me so well. And when we looked into why is it that actually older athletes are satisfied more than the younger athletes, which flies in the face of what we expected, and we looked at all the research around it, what we found was that actually older athletes are better at creating their own environments and what they will accept and what they won't accept. So not all coaching interventions are equal. And now we're getting into the psychology of social dynamics and social hierarchy and that stuff. And there is something where a coach will address an older athlete differently the way there was to a younger athlete. And they will do it because society demands that they do it, when actually the basic psychological needs both are the same.
So can you give an example of how that same information might be delivered differently to an older, a younger athlete?
I think we go to the continuum, and I think if we look at the continuum of directive coaching and the non-directive coaching, younger athletes are going to get more directive coaching. They're going to get the more, you sit there, you do this, you do that. I exaggerate for effect, and coaches don't really talk like that, but you get the gist. The older athletes will be a bit more persuasion, a bit more persuasive, a bit more conversational, and they will naturally do the adult-orientated, autonomy supportive coaching style, where it will become more of a two-way dialogue, where it will become more of a what do you want to do today, how can I support you type of conversation, rather than this is what we're going to do today, and if there's no questions we'll crack on. But actually what you'll find is that if you're an 18-year-old athlete, your needs are just the same as the older ones. You're just a bit more accepting of an autonomy frustrating environment, or just with it society expects you to.
So could you just simply flip that over and give the directed coaching to the older people and they'd be fine with it?
No, well, what would happen is, and again, this isn't our research, this is the reading around that we did to try and explain what our results or to interpret our results. What you will tend to find is that adults of all ages benefit from adult-orientated coaching, and adult coaching is a form of autonomy supportive coaching. So really, I think if you give more directive coaching to older adults, you would find that they would vote with their feet. They would avoid that frustrating environment for themselves. It would reduce the numbers. It doesn't have that effect on younger athletes because they're more accepting of it. So really, it's incumbent on coaches to recognise that and think that just because they accept it, don't push back, don't question it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not having the negative effects that it would have on an older athlete who's more willing to speak up and say, do you know what, who do you think you are? Again, I have direct effects. I'm giving you extremes to illustrate points. I'm sure you get where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. I have to say that my experience is that more, if you're working with experienced athletes, they expect more interaction. Yeah. And people who are beginners or intermediates, you can say, you know, feedback and there's just only silence.
And that's a really, really good point, that, and I'm pleased you've raised that. And because this is about, I'm talking about social hierarchies, and they're so embedded and so expected, so normal to people, that if the coach just started changing their behaviour, then the athletes will be thinking, well, what's going on here? And it will slightly unnerve them. So you need to have a conversation. It's a bit like, I mean, my background is leadership training for senior people. And if you put somebody through quite extensive training like I used to do, I always used to have to give a warning at the end to say, your teams aren't going to be ready for you to go back differently. You're going to have to give them some sort of explanation about why you're doing it differently and what you're trying to achieve and what you need from them. And if you start delegating more responsibility to them, they need to be ready to accept it, because otherwise you will get exactly like you just said there, where people will say, well, whatever. What do you want to do today? Well, whatever, because they're used to being told what to do. So they haven't really given any thought, they haven't prepared, they haven't reflected properly, all of the sort of stuff that you need to do when you're doing adult-oriented coaching. It needs to be a two-way process. And what I find is that athletes expect an awful lot of their coaches. And to some extent, that's reasonable if they're being paid. You can say, well, they're being paid to do a job and I expect to return that investment. But so many coaches are just doing it for their own rewards and their own enjoyment. And I think that the motivation is a two-way thing. You also need to fulfill the motivational needs of the coaches as well. Otherwise, they're going to stop coming and they'll just think, well, I'm just going to go back to rowing again. Why would I coach? So it needs to be a two-way process. It needs to be a conversation to say, I'm going to try something a little bit different. This is what I'm going to be asking of you. Because I coach at my own club, I just say, well, the reason I'm quite directive is because whenever I ask people what they want to do, it's always, I'm not bothered. I do a quad, or do you want to do a four? Well, I'm not bothered. Would you prefer sweep or sculling? I like both. It must be so frustrating. So you need to have that conversation. The expectation is two ways. It's not just about beating coaches up to do something differently. This is about actually the dynamics between the two parties.
That's really interesting. And just listening to you explain how to scene set there, I was instantly not actually thinking about a conversation like that at the beginning of the workout. I was actually thinking of something probably on water. When you've done something, then, you know, a drill maybe, and then you would stop and say, you know, how was that? Did you feel any, what did you feel? Did you notice any change? And so you start to train the athletes to be more aware of their own bubble, I suppose, around themselves. And also, I think, using your ears as well as your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I really love that example about training a different way, and that's the thing about the coaching. I mean, and they're really good open questions, non-directive questions like, how did you feel? What do you think went well? What do you think we could improve next time? Did you get everything you needed from me? All that type of stuff. And another good one as well is, what are the resources to draw upon? Because there is almost this expectation that people will turn up at the club, they get coached, and whether they end up any good or not at the end of it is down to the quality of the coach, when actually the coach is just one resource that's available to the athlete. So in between, there are things that they can look at. They can look at podcasts, they can dial into groups like this. There's lots of things that people can do that themselves to work on it. It could be a fitness thing, it could be anything, but it just makes it more about the athlete and makes it athlete centered, so that they can actually take that ownership and think, right, what do I need to develop all of these areas, get me past the plateau that I'm currently at, or to the point where I need to be, or on the podium, or whatever my ambition is.
That's really, really interesting. So the way to introduce it is a scene set, explain, try it, and then, of course, I'm guessing ask for feedback at the end of the outing as well.
Yeah. And feedback, the other thing that you'll find in sports coaching in particular is it's very, very task orientated. So you don't get many conversations about, did you get what you needed from me? Could I have done it differently? Could I have explained it differently? Do I explain it well enough for you? Because some people, an explanation works really well. Some people want to be shown. Some people want to have somebody sit in boat while they try it. Some people say, well, why are you doing that? Because you might have stabilizers. It's all of that. So you get different people, and some people are worried about the boat flipping. And you need to be aware of all of these things, because they're all distractions and they're all issues, and every athlete is going to be slightly different. And that's why I say it's particularly difficult in an 8, but you just do it a different way. So it just shifts from one-on-one coaching to group coaching. It's still done in the same way.
I certainly remember one of my early coaches, when I was first learning to row, the style training, what I would call fault coaching. Rebecca,
Yeah.
you're doing this wrong, do this. And then a few years later, we had a coach who didn't really pick out individuals at all. It just said, we are all going to try and, for example, square early. And the direction was given as to where they wanted us to be rolling the handles square, on the recovery, and what to listen for, or what to feel for. And then we all did it together. And so it was an interesting effect, because you didn't feel like you were falling behind or getting picked on. Yeah.
Another really good point that previous research has highlighted exactly that. Actually, sports coaching is very much focused on fault correction, whereas executive coaching isn't. So executive coaching would talk about what are your strengths. So you go into this new role, what strengths do you bring? You're going to maximise the benefits of those. And I've never had that really with my experience of sports coaching. So my strength that I would bring is, as I said in the introduction, I've been on the erg for decades. I can pull some fairly impressive times for my age now and all of that. But obviously the water, that's not matched by my technique, and I'm now competing against people who've been rowing for 40 plus years. So actually that's the gap. But so the focus is very much on technique, when actually I've got some strengths that I can bring to the party as well. And other than being stuck in of an 8, if I'm in an 8, with the other sort of daft lads really, it's not really tapped into, if you know what I mean.
So what might the coach do to draw on your personal strengths?
I think, well, if we move away from me to athletes in general, and start to look at, it's a different conversation. So rather than, we'll sit you in the boat, we'll go out for a row, and I'll tell you what you're doing, not so well, and I'll balance it with some stuff that you're doing as well. Just move it towards okay, what are your strengths? Right, and then ask me. Say, your technique lets you down now. There's no way you can apply your full power onto bad technique. It's not going to work. So what do you want to work on? So actually your strength works really, really well, and to your advantage. And I was, well, actually, I don't really want to spend as much time in the water as I'm currently doing. I want to get my technique right on the erg, because I've been doing it for decades, and actually my technique on the erg isn't great. And that is in the way now, because all the time I'm doing it wrong on the erg still. So difficult to transfer it across. So actually, that's what I'm struggling with. So it looks like I'm struggling in the boat, but actually it's just the underlying issue is the erg, and I could tell you that, and then it could be that actually I don't want to do anything strength wise, or have the club entered in the indoor rowing championships. Maybe I could do that and represent the club for that, or something else, just as a bit of a side interest. There are loads of different things that you could do. There's no definitive approach it this way, approach it that way. It's more have the two-way conversation about what are your strengths, what the areas of development for you, and how you want to develop. Because generally what the coach will do is say, right, I've spotted that you need to work on A, B, or C. So this is what we're going to work on today. So today we're going to work on B. When actually I'll say, I'm not really too worried about that. Actually, I want to work on C, and can we accommodate that? That would be the approach, really. I don't know if that made sense. It was a bit complicated, that bit, but
it made good sense. And if I were your coach, I would actually also encourage you to use your strength in the boat, but to do it by creating a stable environment. So maybe half the crew sit at the boat level, and we'll do power strokes, and take you carry your partners, and then you swap, and they row and you sit still and they're carrying you. So it's a loading training, because you're likely to perform really well for that. And if you don't perform really well for that, it's also a useful learning for you about where am I failing to connect my leg to the tip of the blade, and where are my technique failings that are not quite helping me when I think I should be really good at this, because when it comes to power delivery, I've got it.
Yeah. Well, I think of another way, back to the motivation theory. One thing that did just pop in my mind now is that I'm encouraged not to take a speed coach in the boat with me when I'm only single. When actually, the thing I'm currently working on is around ratios, because I've been rushing the slide. But actually, when I take a speed coach out with me in the single, and I find that I'm getting the ratios right, slowing the slide right down, I find the boat's going faster. Now, which is why it was pointed out to me. So, but as a bit of an erg monster, that's a really useful thing for a coach to know, because that's a big motivator for me. Because when I see that boat going faster, I think, oh, this is worth persevering with. And not only that, it's actually easier. I'm getting more of a rest, and the boat's going faster. This is a win-win. But actually, it's just the fact that I can see the numbers in front of me, which I'm so used to doing, that actually, although I'm not applying any more power, the fact that the numbers is something that motivates me, it's a really, really good way of reinforcing that that's something that's working.
Cool. So I would say to you, go and find a little app that is a metronome, and set it to beat for 20 strokes a minute. So you don't have the numbers, but you have the guide to help you with your ratio work.
Right.
Just go beep, beep, beep. And you know that beep needs to be your catch, for example, or finish, it doesn't matter, as long as it's the same. And you then have, it's not a number, but you have a regulator against which to judge your own work effort. When you're probably working too hard up the slide, but also it then might encourage you to use other means of judging speed. So it might be that you then look at distance you'll go past your stern if you're in the single. If you're in an 8, it's whether or not, let me get this right, strokes catch how far behind the puddle left by 2 from the previous stroke is, which is, if it goes into the exact same puddle, it's called chaining, in the lingo that I learned.
All right.
If you, most states, you should be able to, especially at low rate, get 2 or 3 feet of difference between the center of one puddle where their stroke is about to put their blade in and the center of the puddle that's passing. And we call that cover, which is, the distances from center to center of one puddle is called cover. So it's a little harder to judge in a single because there's only one of you, but in an 8, it's very easy to judge. It's like, how fast are we going for this rate? Well, let's look at how much cover we've got. And it works on bow side, of course, as well.
And I think that's a perfect example there, Rebecca, really, of what we're talking about today, because we moved from, actually, I've got a fair bit of power which I can't really apply because I haven't got the technique nailed yet, to having a bit of a conversation. So how does that manifest itself? And then playing out to saying we're actually now looking back to a technique thing, which will actually improve your overall stroke. So we've kind of got that where you're meeting my needs, delivering what I want, but in a different way. So you're not saying, sit in a boat and pull as hard as you can or push as hard as you can. You basically talking around and saying, right, where do we need to be? And that's the difference between coach knows best to actually between us. We'll get there, and we won't quite understand how, but the magic will happen once we start talking it through.
Any final observations that people listening today might like to take into their own coaching?
I think that the biggie for me really is that this isn't about changing the world. This is about recognizing that you've got that spectrum, that people move up and down, and really what the research is saying is sports coaching is very much fixed towards one end of the spectrum, executive coaching is very much fixed towards the other, and actually they probably need to move a little bit inwards. I'm not saying that coaching in rowing will ever get to the situation where it gets to executive coaching and there's no direction at all. You need people who understand the business. You need people who've been there, who've done it, experienced it, have got the techniques that can help the athletes. But really it's how they're applied. So it's about the conversation. So 2 things really is about everybody can benefit from that, but actually bear in mind that younger adults and probably juniors, we didn't test juniors, but probably juniors would benefit from it even more because they are just tolerating autonomy, frustrating environments more than their older counterparts. So don't fundamentally change, just look at reflecting a bit and just shifting the balance a little bit.
And the benefit, of course, is a faster learning curve and a more, I suppose, emotionally satisfied athlete.
Yep, and higher motivation.
And of course, it's all about.
Yeah, for both parties, because the coach will get more from it as well. That's the other side of it as well. It's a 2-way street, this. So don't just try and deliver more for your athletes. Expect more from them as well. Make it a genuinely 2-way process.
Dave, thank you so much for giving us your time. I will put the link to Dave's paper in the show notes so you can go and read the detail for yourself. Dave, how can people get in touch with you if they want to discuss this further?
I'm happy to share my email address as well. I've got no problem with that. If you want to contact me directly, and I'll answer any questions as best I can.
Well, thank you so very much. And till next time, bye-bye.
Thank you.
We are part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your fellow rowers about the show. If you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.